Hello friends, end of the year content is upon us, and part of end of the year content is planning for next year. And a very big video that I have done for the last few years is 20 something in 2020 something. So this year, 25 in 2025. And this year, my friend Bree from 4 Positive Books made a bingo board for 25 and 25, which I love and will be using to fill my 25 spots. Because frankly, picking 25 books at the beginning of the year, it's hard. It's hard to decide what I want to read. So I love that this is prompt-based and therefore gives me some direction on what 25 books to add to this list. I have sat down with Bree's bingo board and I have filled every prompt. So let's dive in and see which books I will be reading in 2025 to fill this bingo board. I will not be doing synopses in this video. We're not going to do synopses. I may give like a couple of 1-2 word little trope things if I know them, because if I did synopses on 25 books, we would be here forever. We would be here for the rest of time. So I am just going to really let you know why these books are in this spot, what made me pick them up, and that's really it. It's going to be really quick, little bits on each one. When I was making this list, I really looked at physical books on my TBR, specifically books I brought in fairly recently that I'm really excited to read, but also books that I know I am ordering or have already pre-ordered for 2025. There's a number of book club books that I know I will be reading in 2025. There's a number of brand new releases that I'm very excited about, and some series continuations, again, that I know I'm going to be reading. So I slotted those in as I could as well. Anyway, let's dive into the first row of this bingo board and the first prompt, which is a 2025 release. Obviously, I own nothing physically that is released in 2025. However, I do know what the first B&K Book Club book is that we will be reading in 2025, which will be February's choice, because January's technically releases in December, and we're reading it in January. But February's releases in January, and we're going to read it in February. And we are going to be reading Out of the Woods by Hannah Bottom Young. This was my pick. I have read one book by Hannah Bottom Young, and I have been meaning to read so many more because I loved the one that I read. This is this author's newest release, coming out in January, so therefore released in 2025. Since this is a mandatory 2025 read for me, and also I picked it for B&K, so it's a much anticipated release for me, this was a really easy spot to fill. The next prompt on this list is a one-word title, and in my quest to read more cozy fantasy next year, I've decided to put in Rewitched by Lucy Jane Wood. This cover instantly got my attention when it recently came out and I was seeing it everywhere. It's cozy fantasy. I've recently really discovered a love for that subgenre of fantasy, and I think this is the perfect fit to kind of diversify this TBR because I do want a good mix of romance and fantasy throughout these 2025 books. The next prompt involves travel, and I will say this one gave me a minute to try and pick a book. I don't like boat books. I don't like car trip books. I don't like time travel books. This prompt does not scream Britney in any way, shape, or form. But then I remembered that I am currently reading through the Cosmere with my patrons. And 3 books from now, where we are currently, so we will definitely read it next year, is Tress of the Emerald City, which is a boat book, which does make me nervous. I'm not sure if I'm going to love it as much as so many other people did. It is a retelling though, so that might help a little bit. We'll see when I get to it, but since I already know I'm going to read it and it does involve boats and travel, I'm going to read Tress of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson. For number in the title, I decided to go with a brand new release that I just bought yesterday. I just bought it yesterday, and I'm really excited to read it. I bought it because of the sprayed edges. Also, a couple people that I know that had the ARC really liked this book. It is a Red Tower book, so that always makes me a bit nervous, but lately Red Tower books have been working for me. The last 3 have been solid for me, so fingers crossed, we just keep with that vein, and that is The Last One Alive by Rachel Housel Hall. This book is so pretty. I love these sprayed edges. Also, later in this bingo board, there is a snake prompt, and had I not already had another book, this one could work for snake on the cover as well, because the printed hardback does have a snake on the cover. I wanted to mention that because I feel like the snake prompt may be harder for some people, so I wanted to point out that this one could work for that as well. I'm pretty sure I'm entering my romantasy era, and I am loving adding all these beautiful sprayed edges books to my shelves and reading them fairly quickly to see if I love them as much on the inside as I do on the outside. Hopefully, this one I do. For the final prompt of our first row, we have a cover buy, and this book is kind of a cover buy because the cover is gorgeous, but I did pick it up knowing that I think it is something I will really enjoy, and that is Blood of Hercules by Jasmine Moss. This is a fantasy romance book that is obviously Greek mythology coded. I love Greek mythology books, and I'm really liking romantasy books that have Greek mythology in them. Again, I did know a couple people who have read this already and are screaming its praises, so I really hope it works for me too, but look at this cover. This cover is beautiful. So you can't say this isn't a cover buy because this cover is gorgeous. But I also think the synopsis and the general idea of this book works for me as well. So let's start on to our second row, and the first one in our second row is seasonal read, and the whole point is to pick a seasonal read that you pick in the season that it's for. I've decided to pick a winter holiday book, so it will be the end of 2025 before I pick this up, and that is A Season of Second Chances by Jenny Bayliss. I already have a Jenny Bayliss book on my TBR for this year, so I'm going to save this for next year and kind of knock out my TBR from this author that I currently own over the next 2 Christmases. This seems like a charming small town holiday romance, which definitely is the reason I own it. And I do really need to catch up on some of these holiday books that are on my TBR. So hopefully this will make sure that I get to this next holiday season. For LGBTQIA+ rep, I'm going to read Queerly Beloved by Susie Dumond. This is a queer baking romance. That is all I needed to know to have this be on my shelves. Like, I needed no further information, and I cannot wait to finally read this book. I got it in the summer, so it hasn't been on my TBR that long, about 6 months. You know I love a baking romance, so I cannot wait to pick this up. For favorite author's newest release, I had a plethora of options. A lot of my favorite authors are releasing books next year, but a lot of them don't have exact release dates or cover reveals, which I always notice when the cover's not out, that means the release date is not for sure. And I wasn't sure if some of these might get pushed off out of 2025. So I went with one that already has a for sure release date and a for sure cover, and that is First Time Caller by B.K. Borson. I recently finished the Love Light Farm series. I gave 3 out of 4 books 5 stars in that series. This is the author's newest series. It's going to be the first book. I don't know how long the series is going to be, but I'm really excited to see how B.K. Borson does outside of Love Light Farms. For hyped book, I decided to go with Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies by Heather Fawcett. I still have not read this. I want to read more cozy fantasy, and this one is sitting on my shelves just eyeballing me and going, you want to read cozy fantasy? Why have you not read me? And I don't know why I haven't read this yet. I have no excuse, but I need to because already the sequel is already out. I haven't even read the first book. It's super popular here on BookTube, and I need to know what all the fuss is about. This was already going to get read in 2025, so adding this to the list was a no-brainer. The last prompt on this row is color of the year, which I am going to do the Goodreads color of the year, which I won't know what that is until the first of the year. So this one is undecided, and at some point through the year, I'll read the book and let you know that's what I'm using it for. But until I know what color I'm going to be doing, I can't pick this prompt. So let's move on to line 3. So for POC author, I am going to be reading Ace of Spades. I am slightly ashamed that I have not read this book yet because it's dark academia. And it's very popular. People love this book. Why have I not read this? Honestly, I didn't even own it until the first of the month. I finally just purchased this a couple of days ago, like 5-6 days ago. I bought this book. I've already read Where Sleeping Girls Lie, and I really enjoyed the dark academia vibes and the writing style in that book. So I think I'm going to love this. I would be shocked if I don't. For novella, I'm going to be continuing the Simple Wild series with Forever Wild by K.A. Tucker. I read the second book just about 3-4 weeks ago now, and honestly, I don't own a lot of novellas. Most of my books are full-length or very chunky books, so this is one of the few novellas I own. I have it on Kindle, and I really want to continue with this series anyway. Next, we have 5-star prediction, and I am going to do a release that if it is not 5 stars, I will be shocked. I will be shocked. And that is Faithbreaker by Hannah Kaner. This is the third and final book in the Fallen God series. Starts off with God Killer, gave it 5 stars. Next book, Sunbringer, gave it 5 stars. And where we left off in Sunbringer and what I think might happen in this book, 5 stars. It's going to be 5 stars. I love this book. Hannah Kaner is quickly becoming a very tippy top author for me. Auto buy, must read everything that they write, because how they can fit so much fantasy content in such small books is truly outstanding to me. Also, Sketty's on the cover. For Compt, I went with a book that I actually picked up because it gave me vibes of another similar book that I loved. And that book was Icebreaker, and this book is Unsteady by Peyton Corinne. This is a figure skater and an ice hockey player in a romance. It's Icebreaker, or it's at least reminiscent of Icebreaker. Will I love it as much as Icebreaker? Who knows? That's high standards. That's a lot to live up to. But I bought it because I wanted Icebreaker vibes. So instantly when I was like, Compt book, Unsteady. I'm actually surprised this is still sitting on my shelf unread. I was very excited to read this when I bought it, and it just hasn't worked into my schedule, but this is going to get read. This needs to be read sooner rather than later. For friend recommendation, I decided to go with a book that Rainey recommended to me as part of my Every Romantasy TBR. I am almost done reading all of those Every Romantasy books Rainey put on that TBR for me, but I still have a couple that I will be reading early next year. And that book is Blood Mercy by Vela Roth. I know almost nothing about this except what Rainey said in that video, and that was months ago, so I've forgotten. But I do have high hopes for this because the last few Romantasy books that I have read from this list that Rainey made me have gone very well. Plus, it just makes sense to go with the list of recommendations that Rainey gave me to fill the friend rec prompt. For over 400 pages, you would probably think that I'm going to fill this with a fantasy book. That would make sense, right? But no, I'm going to fill it with a romance book because for some reason, I have a romance book on my TBR that is over 500 pages. We all know my thoughts on romances over 500 pages, so you know how much I trust Kelsey when Kelsey said I needed to read this hockey romance. And that is Consider Me by Becca Mack. This is like 520 pages long. I question that. Anytime a contemporary romance is 520 pages long, I have questions. But I do love a hockey romance. And I've heard great things about this. And every time I've talked about this in like sprints or anywhere, people are like, yes, read it. It's great. So we're going to read it. We're going to see if this really needed to be 500 pages long. So for special edition, I don't really have a lot of special edition books. I have a lot of sprayed edges, like first printings, but I don't have any like from book boxes or anything like that. It's very expensive to have that stuff shipped to Canada, and I've just never done so. But I do have a lot of sprayed edges books, so that's what I'm going to use to fill this prompt. And I think all the besties have decided to buddy read this because we were all talking about reading it and we all own it. So I think we're all going to buddy read this sometime in 2025, and that is Bloodguard. This is by CC Robinson, and it is a Red Tower book. At this point, I am just buying every book Red Tower releases because they're pretty, and I will be able to someday tier rank all of Red Tower books, if you want me to, because I will have read them all at this rate. I literally own them all or have owned them depending on which ones I unhauled, because I did unhaul a couple, but like I own most of Red Tower's backlist. And can you blame me? Look how pretty these books are. You can't blame me. I can't be blamed. We didn't have sprayed edges for a very long time, and I'm overcompensating, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. Enter the arena, seize 2 weapons, now try to survive. Sounds good. Chapter titles was a hard one for me because I don't really have a lot of books with chapter titles, or at least I don't know that they have chapter titles until I start reading them. However, I do have a middle grade book on my TBR that does have chapter titles because a lot of middle grade books do, and that is Impossible Creatures. This book is by Catherine Rundale, and this book has so many magical creatures in it. I cannot wait to read this book. It has griffins, it has dragons, it has unicorns. I think it even has more than that, but those are just the ones in the synopsis or on the cover. This is going to be a really quick read. It's middle grade. I'll be able to knock it out really fast, and I think discovering all these magical creatures in a middle grade book will just be so wholesome. Also, I know this was Indigo Books' middle grade of the year, so I have pretty high expectations for this book. Now for debut author, I am going to put a book on that I just got last night when I went to a signing of the author at my bookstore, and that is A 5-Letter Word for Love by Amy James. I really loved meeting Amy last night. It was really nice to just chat with her about this romance and why she wrote it. And also it's based around Wordle, which just seems really fun. I've read a couple of romances based around like trivia or games. I had one around Jeopardy earlier in the year, and I do really enjoy that concept when I read it. Plus, this is her debut book, and I'm really excited to support a local author. For mental health rep, I am going to be reading Weather Girl by Rachel Lynn Solomon. I got this in a little free library a couple months back, and I have been dying to read it. This was on a list of books that had mental health rep in it, so I hope that it does. I got that off Goodreads, but I did double check with Aoife, and she was pretty sure it did as well. I do love a romance where two people are trying to get like two other people together, but then they find out that like they are gonna be together forever and fall in love. For some reason, that really works for me, and that's what we're doing in this book. It's like a meteorologist and a sports reporter trying to get their bosses who are now divorced back together. This is also going to be my first Rachel Lynn Solomon, and I know a lot of people love this author, and I'm excited to see if their writing style works for me as well. We're on the last row of this bingo board with Snake on the cover. Again, I've already given you one recommendation that could work. Well, not recommendation, but book option, because I haven't read it, can't recommend it, but one book option that would work. The one I'm going to be doing is The Hanging City by Charlie N. Holmberg. This book is on my R Fantasy TBR, so I just wanted to have a little bit of symmetry with my R Fantasy TBR with 2025. I got 4 months to finish that TBR, and I'm not doing very well. So I really do need to get on that list in early 2025, and honestly, this book sounds so fun with like a troll city under a bridge. For self-published, I'm going to be reading Portal Painter by H.A. Stephen. I actually know this author. Like, I know her. I've met her. She owns one of my favorite coffee shops. And I still have not read the book, so I need to read the book. I own the first 2 in the series. The third isn't out yet, so like I need to read it so that I can pick up the third when it comes out. For new to you author, I'm going to be picking Lana Ferguson's Under Lock and Key. This is a contemporary romance set in Scotland, and it somehow has to do with the Loch Ness Monster just based off the title and the cover. But that is all I know about it, and I just bought it the other day when I was at the bookstore, and I really want to read it, and I don't think I'm going to get to it before 2025, so like I might as well put it on this list. For TBR Vet, we're going to put on a thriller. I've had a lot of fantasy and a lot of romance on this TBR, but I have a lot of thrillers on my shelves that I haven't read. I haven't been in my thriller era much in 2024. I've read a couple, mostly for B&K Book Club, but I do have a lot on my shelves that I do eventually want to read. And having one on this list will at least make sure I pick up a couple thrillers this year. And that thriller is going to be Murder in the Family by Cara Hunter. This concept of us trying to solve it while they try to solve it in this book makes me want to like pull out a murder board and get my red strings and try and see if I can figure it out along with the book. I really wanted to read this when it was released, but it just didn't work out. And then it ended up being on my shelves for like a year. So I need to get this read at some point, and it works perfect for this TBR Vet prompt. Then finally, for From Another Challenge, I'm going to pick from our Fantasy TBR again, because again, early 2025, I need to get a move on. I'm going to do Where the Dark Stands Still. This book was a Goodreads Choice nominee, so it was also on my TBR for Goodreads Choice Award nominees that I owned that I wanted to read. There's a mouthful for you for explaining a TBR. Anyway, I did not get to it before the end of the year. I'm not going to get to it in the next few weeks. So on this list it goes. This cover is why I bought this. I bought this book like on release day. I hadn't heard anything about it, but the cover immediately got my attention. Also, magical forest is my vibe. A lot of my favorite books are set in a magical forest setting, so there was a lot of reasons why I gravitated towards this book. But as always, I did buy more books than I could read in a calendar year, and it's still sitting on my shelf, so now it will be read in 2025. But that is the end of the 25 books I am going to read in 2025. Of course, this is really only 24 because, again, can't choose my color of the year one just yet. But it's a pretty solid list, and maybe I will update the description box with what I chose for color of the year once I know what the color of the year is. Are you participating in Bree's bingo board of 25 in 2025? I really hope you are. The video is going to be linked in the description box if you want to know more about this bingo board. If you made it all the way to the end of the video but have nothing to say to me down in the comments, put a woods or tree or something leafy emoji for Where the Dark Stands Still, since that was the last book that I talked about and it's the first one that I can see. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, friends.